which will be fun and interesting. Okay, so we are on page 11 of our notes. Everybody's there? Page 11. And down at the bottom, we've already done part of the page, but down at the bottom it says 1.5. And it says find this. Now, this is the notation for the inverse function.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
So we are going to find the inverse. So the given function is this. I am going to show you the way it's easiest for me to find the inverse, but if you have other strategies that you've learned before, or maybe you just think about inverse functions, I don't know, you can certainly do it however you want. The way I do it is very procedural. So those of you that like to go step by step by step, this will work for you. So the first thing I do is remember that this right here, f of x, is the same as y. So I just rewrite my problem with a y. Now here comes the big step. You switch your variables. In an inverse, what was y becomes x and vice versa. So that's the step right here. Now I'm going to get y by itself. So that's easy. I'll subtract 1, right? And I'll divide by 2. So my inverse is x minus 1 divided by 2.
Oh,
Do you put it like that too?
Yes, that's the final answer. So remember in the first step text, we changed the f into a y. So in the end, we have to change the y back into the f. All right? Now I want to show you something really cool and a good way that you can check your answer. Shiloh, what's your football number? 25. So I'm going to put 25 into my f function. Okay? So put 25 in here. What do we get? 51. Okay? Now I'm going to come over to my answer, and I'm going to put 51 into my answer.
Oh yeah, that doesn't work. It's literally the inverse of each other.
And what happens when I put 51 into the answer? I get my 25. So what do inverses do? They undo each other. Yeah. So if f changed 25 into 51, then f inverse changes 51 back into 25. So if we got a quiz question and you want to know, oh gosh, did I do that right? That can be your check. Pick a random number, put it in, and then take that answer and put it in over here and see if you got what you started with. Now let's try the next one. Your job is to find the inverse. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is get rid of the f. Now this is the big step. What is this step?
Switch the variables.
Switch the variables. I have to switch the variables. Okay? Now what? I have to get y by itself. So I'll start by timesing by 2. Right? Then I will plus 1. Then I will divide by 3. So 2x plus 1 over 3. Okay? And my answer then is, I'll write my answer right here. My answer, f inverse, is 2x plus 1 over 3. So this is what I would put in the answer blank. That's my inverse. Okay? Tex, what's your football number?
79.
79. So I'm going to put 79 into the original. Oh, yeah, we would have to have a huge number. Let's see. 79 times 3 is, let's see, that's 237 minus 1, so that's 236. divided by 2, 118.
Yeah.
Now, take that 118 and put it in here. So 2 times 118 is 236, plus 1 is 237, divided by 3 is 79. Same number we started with. Isn't that amazing? It's pretty cool. All right, let's see. What's next?
Didn't you just say that you inverse all the other ones? Inverse literally everything.
Fast forward, man. I use the restroom really fast.
Is it an emergency? You have flex in what, 20 minutes? Can you wait?
But I just gotta be easy, right? I had to before class. I just had to take the test.
So you're telling me you can't wait?
I mean,
If you can't wait, go. But I'm just saying, I'm a 60-year-old woman that had 4 kids.
That's a lot.
All right. Okay, here we go.
Switch the full line places and then change the two
First thing we do is change this into a Y. When you copy the problem down, you might just do that, just make that a Y automatically. Then what do we do?
Switch variables.
Switch the variables. Well, times by 9. And I know some of you can do this in fewer steps, and I'm okay with that as long as you're not making mistakes. In the answer blank, you're going to put F inverse equals 9x minus 2 over 4.
So you're literally just changing the properties of what they are to the inverse of it.
Now, we're not going to check this one. Remember, our check is we make up a number and put it in. Then we take that answer and put it in there. We should get our original number back. I do want to talk about what Brendan keeps blabbing about down here. He keeps talking about the operations that are going on in the problem. So I do want you to think about this. Here's the original problem. It is a function. Think of a function as a machine. You put in a number, you do stuff to it, and it gives you a new answer. Okay, so if I'm the function machine. If you give me a number, what's the first thing I'm going to do with it? Times it by 4. And then I'm going to add 2, and then I'm going to divide by 9. If I'm the inverse, you back me up. So the last thing I did was divide by 9. So in the inverse, the first thing I have to do is times by 9. And then I have to subtract the 2, and then I have to divide by the 4. So some kids don't need to go through all these steps. They can think about it in their head and say, okay, I got to reverse the operations in the reverse order. So I'm going to times by 9, subtract 2, divide by 4. That's a lot to keep track of, but if you can do it, that's fine. That's fine. Some of the problems are a little harder. We're going to get to a couple hard ones here in a minute. But first, we've got one with a radical in it. Okay, so what do we do when we have a radical? I'm just going to write it down like this with the y. Well, first we do what? First we switch the variables.
Square it in that.
Then we will square it.
Change the sign.
So we're going to have x squared equals y minus 2. And then we will add 2. And our answer then is x squared plus 2. And you know what? Doesn't that make sense to you? The original was a square root. Doesn't it make sense that the inverse of a square root would be the squaring? Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Okay, the next quiz we have, which will not be our next class, but it will be the one after that, will be a problem just like this. Okay, so pay close attention. We will have a 1 problem quiz, and this will be it. How does this work? Well, we're going to do the same thing we do. We're going to change that to a y. Then we're going to switch the variables.
Yeah.
Now, this is where the excitement comes in. Because I say I'm going to switch the variables, and I did that, but now I have to get y by itself, right? And the issue is there are two y's. You have to get this equation down to the point where it looks like this one, y equals. And no more y's. That's got to be the only y. You can only have one y in your problem.
I'll get rid of the denominator then.
So I got two y's now, and I have to figure this out. So pay attention. These are the steps you're going to have to keep track of. Okay? What's your idea?
Get rid of the denominator.
Get rid of the denominator. So I'm going to get rid of the denominator. And this is what I'm going to have. Now, if you're confused by that, then you're going to write 3y minus 4 on both sides. That's what you're doing. This is going to cancel. You moved it over to here. And then you got to distribute, right? So now I have that. You can only have one y in the problem. You can't have two.
So you're going to have to get
So I'm going to rearrange things so that all the y's are on one side. So I'm going to bring this over. And all the non-y's are on the other side. So take a look at that and see what I did.
You have an x there. So what could you do by that?
Anything with a y had to come over here. And anything that didn't have a y had to go over here. Now, how many y's are you allowed to have? One. So I'm going to factor out the y. Because if I factor out the y, I'll only have one, right? And that'll be 3x minus 2.
And then you divide by 3x minus 2.
And then if I divide by the parentheses, and that's it. That's right. That's my inverse.
So you divide the whole thing by 3x minus 2?
Yep.
Oh, wait.
Just like in the very beginning, Kyle, we multiplied by the denominator, right, to get rid of it. So now I'm going to divide to put it back over there. So this is our answer. Now I'm going to erase this because we're going to do another one, but I want to go back through the steps to make sure you got it so we can do it on the next one. Once we changed our f into a y, we switched our variables. Then we multiplied the denominator over here. This is the critical step. Once I got rid of my denominator, got everything like on a line here, what did I then have to do? Rearrange. I had to rearrange the problem so everything with a y was on one side and everything else was on the other side. What did I do that for? So that I could factor out my y. Because these don't add. They're never going to add. These are not like terms. So the only way to get one y is to factor. But you can't factor until you have them on the same side. So we moved them to the same side, factored them out, and then divided. Okay, so let's try the next one. We're going to do it. Look, this is exactly what your quiz looks like. So next time we're together, we'll do a practice one, and then the time after that, you're going to have to do one by yourself.
X minus 2, 4x plus 8.
All right, so here we go. Step 1. I already changed the f into a y, so what's the next step?
Get rid of the denominator.
Get rid of the denominator. So I'm going to bring this over here, right? And when I bring this over here, it's going to be 4xy plus y. Because when you bring it over here, you're doing a distributive. Does everybody see that?
Wait, did you switch the variable?
Oh wait, I didn't switch the variables. Ah! I gotta switch my variables, thank you. Good thing I have you people around. Step one, switch those variables. Then we'll bring our denominator over. Maddie, we're in our notes.
Switch from X and Y.
Alright, so take a look. Everybody okay here? Now that I fixed my issue? Alright, what's the next step now? What do I have to
Take
do?
out Y.
Well,
Oh, you have to
can I
rearrange
take
it.
out a Y yet?
Rearrange it first.
Can I factor a Y out now?
Rearrange it
No.
It's to the other
They
side.
gotta be on the same side. So the first thing we're gonna do is do a little switching here. So I'm gonna bring the Y over here, so I'll subtract 8Y, and then take the X and move it over there.
Then you're gonna factor it down.
Now I can take that Y out, I'm taking out just the Y. Here's a point. I know there are other things I could take out, like a 4, but my goal is to get Y by itself. So I'm gonna leave everything, I'm just taking out the Y. So that will be 4x minus 8, right? And then what's my last step?
Divide it over.
I'm going to divide, thank you. I'm going to divide. So my answer, the thing that's going to go in the answer blank, or get a circle around it, is negative x minus 2 over 4x minus 8.
Wait, there's a...
No, only take out the y.
That's
Because your goal is to get y by itself. You don't want 4y, you want y.
a shortcut for that.
Okay? Alright, so that kind of problem is your next quiz.
Take it now.
Okay. Now, number 2. Is f of x a function? So the question is this a function?
No.
Why?
Vertical
Vertical
line.
line test.
Oh, yeah.
Passes the vertical line test.
Yes.
That is a function.
Wait, what?
Why?
No,
Somebody
no.
help. Somebody said why. We didn't answer that question. The vertical line test.
Oh, because parabolas aren't straight.
The vertical line test. It passes the vertical line test. So this is the original. Is the original a function? And the answer is yeah, it's sitting right there. Is the inverse a function?
Yep.
And the answer is no. And here's why. I want you to think about what we discovered earlier. Let's look at this ordered pair right here, and I'm just going to make it up. I'm going to say that's the ordered pair 3, 7. Okay? Then what would be this ordered pair over here? Negative 3, 7, right? Now, in function land, that's fine. The ordered pair, negative 3, 7 and 3, 7, that's beautiful. But what happens when I find an inverse? The x and the y switch. And if the x and the y get switched, then I'll have 7, negative 3, and 7, 3. What about that? You can't have repeated x's, right? So the inverse is a no. Now, the good news is there's a test for that. The horizontal line
because it
test
switches its... Yeah. Okay.
tells you whether the inverse is a function. So for the function itself, you do vertical. For the inverse, you do horizontal. See how this hits more than once?
Because they have
That
2
means
x's.
the inverse is a no. If something passes both, it is called 1 to 1. So the third question says, is it 1 to 1? And the answer is no, because to be 1 to 1, it means no x's repeat and no y's repeat. Everything's matched up once. So if you have either repeating x's or repeating y's, you can't be 1 to 1. Okay? So let's see if you picked up on that. Let's look at B. Is B a function? We're talking about the original. No, it is not a function.
But the inverse is.
But the inverse is, because the inverse the function passes the horizontal line test. So it is a function. The inverse is a function. Does that make it 1 to 1? No. Because to be 1 to 1, these have to both be yeses. You have to pass both tests. All right, let's look at C. Is C itself a function?
Yes.
Yes. Is the inverse a function?
Yes.
Yeah, because it would pass that test too, right? So would you consider this 1 to 1?
Yes.
Yes.
Is that the only function that's 1 to
1 to 1 means 1 to 1 means that it passes both tests. Can you think of another BFF? That's your identity. Can you think of another BFF that passes both?
Greatest integer, the one with like the separate lines.
Okay. Actually, it doesn't, because when we graph this right here, this piece right here, it doesn't pass the horizontal line test. So that would not be 1. Square root. The square root function passes horizontal and vertical. That's 1 to 1. Can you think of another one? Cubing. Cubing looks like this. It certainly passes vertical and horizontal. Cue you awake, Angel. You are? Okay. Huh? Okay. I just hope you're awake. Okay. All right. So everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
All right. We're gonna do one more set of problems here. So we're looking at part 3. 1-5 is a big section, so we're not going to get through all of it today. But we can do 1-3. Natural logarithm, its inverse is a function. Actually, you want me to blow your mind? The inverse of the logarithmic function is the exponential function. They are inverses of each other. How amazing is that? We'll talk more about that in like chapter 3 or something. Okay, so here's what I want you to do while I'm copying this down. I want you to, next to each of these points, I'm on page 12, this is 3A, I want you to label these. So I want you to actually write on your paper, that's the point 0, 1, this is 1, 0, this is 2, 2, and this is 3, 0. And over here we've got negative 1, 0. Write these points down for me, please. You'll see why in a minute. Quit whining. Okay, so we got some random shape. Now, hold on to your hats. We're going to sketch the inverse. But that is so easy. The reason I had you write down those points is, to sketch the inverse, you simply switch the variables. Isn't that how we wrote our equations? Didn't we start by switching y and x? So now we're going to do that graphically. So instead of plotting the point negative 4, 0, we're going to plot the point 0, negative 4. And then we'll go here, take your points in order, because then we're gonna join them in order. So this would become the point -1, -3. -1, -2.
Oh, you're just switching the axis.
You're switching the x's and y's. And 0, -1. Right, that should be -1, -2. And 0, -1. All right, I'm going to go ahead and join what I've done so far. See how this guy was this little trapezoidy thing down here? Now he's sideways, which makes sense because we switched the x's and y's. Okay, then I got the point 1, 0, 0, 1. I'm switching the x and y. 2, 2 will stay the same. And 0, 3.
Ooh, that's cool. That is cool.
So if you start with an equation, like we did at the very beginning, and you have to do the inverse, you switch x and y. If you start with a picture, and you have to do the inverse, you switch x and y. That's what we do. We just switch the x and the y. You okay with that?
Yeah.
All right. Those of you that haven't seen your tests yet from last time and want to stay and look at it,